Hi everyone. Sorry we're a little bit late, but those on Facebook Live, I want to somehow show you my guest, Andreas
Hello, everybody on Facebook
Balasis.
Live.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I am a psychotherapist, so I have my master's in social work. I work in a private practice currently. I have my own coaching and consulting business as well on the side.
Great.
And yeah, I help a range of clients, adults through, have a couple elementary school kids as well, anywhere in between. Work with couples, work with families.
Good.
So
Okay.
I do what I can to help as best as I can, and hopefully offer some expertise here.
Yeah, and Andreas said, I'm sorry, I said you were from New Jersey, but you're from Long Island.
All good. Common mix-up.
Yeah, I know, that's so funny. So I'm gonna put this down. I kind of wanted to. We have a little bit of a. Everybody knew from last. There we go. There you are. We don't need to see me. I'm on the podcast. Yeah, this Facebook Live is a little bit. Sorry, guys.
It's a learning curve.
Oh my gosh, look at that. Everyone's gonna be laughing at me.
No.
Yeah, they can. It's okay. But I guess on Facebook Live we aren't gonna see both of us, but we will on the podcast, which I will post as soon as we're done. So we're going to talk about the psychological aspects of the wrongly accused or being falsely accused. And the reason why, I reached out to you is that the Life and Stories came about through a situation I went through with a very long-term relationship in which I was falsely accused of theft and deception. And I, long story short, it's on the page. So I want to talk about how when things like that happen, I can tell you when it first happened, I was so devastated, couldn't sleep and eat. Just couldn't sleep. You're playing over things over and over in your mind. You just, it's unbelievable. It's shocking. It's, devastating, and couldn't stop crying. Even though I'm not a crier. But for the first few days, it was just absolute devastation trying to make sense of why someone that I had a close relationship, much like a marital relationship that's, that close, would do something. And then I kind of moved into a little bit of a self-care mode where I kind of like wanted to ignore it and make it go away until the perpetrators made movements in which I had to make some steps when my business and my foundation started being attacked. Then I'm like, okay, I need to do something.
You have no choice to try to defend yourself in that case.
Yeah.
Then it moves past just a friendship. Or
Yeah.
even if you could describe it close enough, like almost like a marital relationship,
Yeah, we were very close. Did a lot for her. She used to teasingly tell my husband, well, I'd marry Tina if I could, because I did a lot for her. I managed a lot of things in her life that normally you would look to a spouse to do. And I reckon I did it out of love, which is weird how of all things to accuse me of were just strange, because they were actually the opposite of what I've done in her life, is to make sure she was financially secure, make sure that, work life, home life, anything that I could help her with, I did. So the accusations were stunning. Couldn't figure out where they came from until I discovered several prescriptions and narcotics, called into my name. And then it was like that aha moment, where I started to want to forgive her, but the attacks kept coming. So I was constantly struggling with compassion and anger.
So at that point, right, like I'd imagine it's hard to extend that compassion elsewhere, even given your long relationship leading up to it, and that anger. Well, sometimes if we don't feel like we have an outlet, the body keeps score. So in this case, that betrayal becomes even more poignant, and it might manifest itself in those crying spells that you're not accustomed to, in the racing thoughts, the difficulty sleeping, ruminating on maybe all the signs that we had kind of touched on before we even started rolling through. Like, what other things may have came up in the past that could have led you to see that, and now you're reflecting negatively on yourself because you didn't see that. So there's a lot that goes into it. That's a deep cut after all that time and all that effort that you've invested.
Yeah, I like that. I like that term cut, because that's what I felt like what was happening. It was a constant, cutting into, obviously our relationship, cutting into business relationships, cutting into how I would describe, coexisting relationships, where where, you know, she kept saying, I want everybody in Syracuse to know, you know, what a scam artist Tina was. And I'm just like, who in Syracuse cares? And who would say that about me? So, you know, that, and then that's why earlier I talked about truth. Then the false accusations started getting just a little ridiculous, a little far-fetched. And so I think people started to back off from the false accusations because then they started to not make sense.
What do you think may have contributed to that escalation?
Well, I will say that she struggled with mental health. It runs in her family, and because obviously I closed off contact with her, I would say that the escalation maybe was due to fear because I knew a lot about her illegal activity, and because I started pushing back, I said, okay, you can continue on with this false narrative that I supposedly, you know, did theft and deception based on you, but let's talk about who's the real criminal here. And that was horrible for me. It was very hard for me to do that. It took me up until we had this falling out on November 1st, Halloween started. It took me until January 1st when she started attacking my foundation is when I finally turned her in for the prescriptions. So I was constantly struggling with what is the right thing to do and what can I live with the rest of my life. And I think once I said, okay, then you know what, all bets are off. I'm going to report you for all the illegal activity you did. And then let the courts decide. So I think that it was just a woman scored, right? I hate to use that, but we women are a little bit more emotional.
I mean, you could speak on it better than I can.
We put a little bit more of emotions out there. Maybe I'm not, you know, not being sexist, but it is just.
If we're going off that generalization,
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
Let's say.
I don't have to.
But
so I'm trying to get people
hey,
to see. There we go. There you are.
But also, sometimes it comes down to just like a pre-programmed biological response,
yes.
right? I'm
yes.
sure you're familiar with
yes.
fight or flight.
Yes, I like that. Let's go with that.
I mean, it's true though. If we feel like we're being attacked, and in this case, our reputation, potentially our livelihood and freedom,
mm-hmm.
we have no choice but to either retreat or to engage. And when you attempted to retreat, she came back harder, and then you realized, okay, I need to engage as well now. When you have two sides that are unwilling to back down, there's going to be an escalation. But from your perspective, from what I'm hearing, that escalation was necessary to protect yourself and to make sure that wrongs were righted.
So I did a lot of research into how does someone get away with, you know, these false statements when it comes to our justice system. And it just opened up a huge Pandora's box of so many situations in which it happens. You know, as we touch base, I was, you know, reading stories about, you know, unfortunately children falsely accusing one parent of some sort of abuse, spouses, you know, when we're in a, you know, divorce proceedings or definitely custody proceedings, there's all these false accusations, and in which, you know, there's always a loser and there's never a winner, in my opinion. I don't ever think that when there's false accusations, there's never a winner. You know, I don't find winning something based on falsehoods is a win.
I guess in the mind of the accuser, it's a win because they're deflecting what they've done onto somebody else. So if the spotlight was going to be on them regardless, let me at least drag somebody else in, and they could take some of the heat away from my actual wrongdoings. Let me implement some perceived wrongdoings onto the other.
That makes sense in my story, because I felt like she needed a narrative in order to discredit me, so that when I came out with this is really what happened and this is why she's saying that, luckily for me it didn't work out that way, because words are not as strong as actual historic truths. Yeah, so I'm not supposed to tap, but anyways, I learned that from thank you, John. I learned that from a gentleman who I was on his podcast. So psychologically it's devastating for the accused, but what I'm finding interesting, especially I talked earlier about what's going on, you know, politically. We have people who believe this, we have people who believe that, right? So one of my lawyers said to me, I can put her on the stand, I can shove all these papers under her nose, and she's still going to believe that her story is truth.
I mean, we see that in the media, right? You bring up
Right.
politics. We
Yeah.
see it in interpersonal relationships, and we see it personally. If you repeat a lie often enough, it might sound cliche, but
Mhm.
eventually it's believed as truth, and we could kind of look at it the same way for ourselves.
Yeah.
Talk about anxiety, depression. You know, these are the areas that I guess I'm best versed in.
Yeah.
When we have negative self-talk, even if the evidence doesn't necessarily justify the feelings, we come to believe that, well, let's just chalk it up to all the negative things we might say about ourselves. In this case, maybe those negative things that, and again, this is purely speculation, right?
Yeah.
I don't know Melissa from a hole in the wall,
Yep.
but from what I've gathered, maybe some of those negative things that could have been internalized on her part were projected outwards.
Okay. Yeah. And I've been spending the last 2 years trying to understand it, because some of it, scared me. I wanted to literally call her up, like because I always was caring about her and making sure she, things were good in her life. And at one point, when we're committing perjury and we're committing illegal acts and filing false police reports, I wanted to call her up and say, what are you doing? And so I'm thinking, is this the substance abuse issue, or is this a mental health issue? And I couldn't, and it wasn't for me to decide. But as recently we've seen somebody, constantly lie about facts, lie about historic truths, and a whole subset of people believing it. So she just needed certain people to believe her, and that would be okay. Um, it's hard for me to understand how that happens. I've tried real hard. The words, like, what, off the fly, what would be the difference between a narcissist and a sociopath? Because those two words have been thrown at me to try to define what was going on against me, and I'm struggling, just still trying to figure out how somebody does this.
I think the simple answer would be malicious intent.
Okay, yeah, that's one of the lawsuits, actually.
So
Yeah.
sociopathy, that's not even a diagnostic statistical manual term anymore, right?
Okay.
So it would be considered antisocial personality
Okay.
disorder.
Okay.
Narcissistic personality disorder is another thing in and of itself.
Okay.
That'd be interesting to pull up, because I'd imagine the symptoms, the diagnostic criteria,
Yeah.
not I'd imagine, there's overlap in each.
Okay.
But I think the malicious intent is what really differentiates it.
Okay.
So
yeah, that makes
there's
sense.
going to be a sense of grandiosity. There's going to be could be delusional sense that we are special and that we require special people to be around us, and if they're not, we can disregard them from our lives. A sense that people are envious of us and we are easily envious of others.
Okay.
There's
Yeah.
actually, let me I jotted down the diagnostic criteria for narcissistic personality disorder.
Well, because I was accused of being one, and I thought it was kind of interesting. So
Here we
yeah.
go. Grandiose sense of self-importance,
Okay.
preoccupation with fantasies of unlimited success,
Okay.
beauty, idealism, belief that they are special and they
Okay.
deserve somebody special.
Okay.
They require excess admiration.
Okay. Okay.
So a sense of entitlement. I know these
Okay.
things all kind of sound synonymous as well, but that's
Yeah. Okay.
there's 9 in total. So they are interpersonally exploitative. I mean,
Okay. Okay.
lack of empathy, envious, and arrogant.
Okay.
But
And
that's
so
the thing.
that-
So that's tough because
you're doing all the points that I've seen happen in the last 2 years. I'm a doctor, so they're going to believe me. Tina has 46, page arrest record. It's like, where? Well, it must be true because I said it. So that to me was grandiose. You know what I mean? Like, I won't rest, she tells an employee or person who used to be, until Tina's, in jail. So to me, grandiose, in domestic relationships, or especially custody, don't we see a lot of stories of children being coached, or a spouse, soon to be ex-spouse, kind of twisting stories, or
it becomes a power struggle, because
Yes.
now it's not about like the well-being
Yeah.
of the children, and in this case the well-being of the parents or the individual that's engaging in these conflicts. It becomes about, how do I win?
Right.
But
And
if we
so
think
that's
about
devastating.
well-being, of
Right?
course,
Devastating to the child. devastating to anybody who's wrongly accused of anything, devastation, and that's why I'm highly interested in doing something with the Innocence Project. I was just reading story after story, and we're now with technology and all the social media we have, we're finding out more and more about these stories. Now we have a Netflix, I believe, a story, Just Mercy. I read that book and cried. I mean,
Yeah.
it was just sick to my stomach. And just yesterday somebody got exonerated, and I'm thinking, how lucky am I that I had the witherall to defend myself, where there's so many people who can't.
They don't have the resources.
Yes. Yeah.
There's structural injustice everywhere. And let this be a microcosm, but it's an interesting point where you mentioned, like, nobody really wins here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no one does.
It's hard because now it comes down to, what do both parties want? And if we're at such a state of tension where we can't sit down and have some sort of amicable conversation as to how this is going to progress,
Yeah.
then both sides become even more emboldened.
Yeah. I mean, and I was asked, I was asked a few times from my legal team, what do you want? And at first the list was long because I was, so angry, but I'm busy, and I'm busy doing good. And I've said a couple times through some of the little live videos that I do, and said to my, friends and family many times, the more time I spend on this, the less time I have to do the community service I love doing, or help somebody else who deserves to be helped, or what have you. Or I have so many projects going on here in our new home, that I finally said to my close circle, the more time I spent in this negative energy, the less time I have for positive things. So I feel like I've come to understand this horrible thing happened. I got through it pretty good in a psychological frame of mind. Many of my friends were saying, please don't change your personality because this horrible thing happened. And I said, no, I don't know how. I'm 53 years old. I really can't change who I am. I will say it's maybe
I
more...
might push back on that a little bit.
Are you? Okay.
I think everyone's capable of change, but
okay.
no.
Yeah, you're right. Okay, that is wrong. You're absolutely right. Absolutely right. But personality, I want to change my personality. Maybe a little bit more cautious.
Personality, this is an interesting one too. We talk about this in grad school, right? So to meet the criteria for a personality disorder, it needs to be pervasive throughout the majority of somebody's life.
Okay.
If you look at, say, borderline personality disorder, which could just be chalked up as emotional dysregulation, hard time regulating emotions, okay? There are therapies like DBT, which is designed for borderline personality disorder, that actually shows people who go through this program end up having better emotional regulation skills than somebody who is not diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. So that tells me that while the criteria is that it needs to be pervasive, there are ways to make it non-impactful,
Okay.
not causing of clinical distress or impairment.
Okay. I think that went through. Sorry.
It's okay. No, so I guess to summarize that, there's promise for change if change is our intention.
Okay.
Just being able to recognize, this is a really disastrous point in my life or my relationship with a longtime friend, but also knowing that you can compartmentalize that and not let it detract from the good that you're capable of doing. That's a positive change, because we can become all enveloped in this conflict, but we decided that that's not the route that we wanted to take. And luckily, you had the resources, you have the supports. That's a beautiful thing.
Right. And I've said that many times. Of course, my resources were because of my relationship and my working relationship with her. And but I would say to my husband and one of my close friends a few times, what if I didn't have all this? It would have been a he said, she said, perhaps, So I think about other people who have been wrongly accused, and I think that the ones that didn't have resources and had no way for, an alibi or could be strong enough to carry on that lie. When I get sick to my stomach when people engage children into lying about, sexual or physical abuse, that they're not going to come away unscathed, being coerced or what have you, knowing, down the road as they become more cognitive of what really happened, as they, reach adult status or maybe even late teenager, of what they went through, and to wrongly accuse a parent or a teacher or whatever the situation is, then there's that other side of it, of being coerced into falsely accusing someone for someone else's benefit.
The sense of agency is taken away at that point. If you're talking about a kid, they have a hard time understanding what exactly is going on in the first place. This is a nurturing figure. This is someone that they're reliant upon. So, yeah, of course I'm going to say what they told me to say. If you're talking about adults, now we're getting into freedom, reputation, ostracization.
Yeah. No, that I get, and that, and just recognizing that I never felt I was alone. I'm sure, like, I knew that. I've said this before. I'm like, look, anybody can accuse anybody of anything. What are we getting out of it? What is what is the end result? What's the reason? And for me, for closure, if you will, I've spoken many times. I will never know the reason. One, I don't see that me having that conversation with the accuser. But if there's no sense of closure, I think that's okay. I don't think you have to have closure on anything. Any thoughts to that?
I mean, I would ask, what does closure even look like? Because sometimes people strive for closure, but there's no way to, the term would be operationalize it, just define it.
Okay.
What would closure in your sense look like? Would that be sitting down and having that conversation, learning why she did it in the first place? Would it be just this being resolved and you guys go your separate ways, you don't have to interact again? I'm curious.
Yeah. So closure to me, and I think my lawyer just asked me last week, Tina, what do you want? Because like I said, in the beginning, my list was long. I wanted her to be charged for every single crime that she did. And then I had to back away from that because it did me no good. I can file all the lawsuits I want, all the civil lawsuits. And I said time and time again, but it takes away from the good I can do. So at this point, at this moment, closure for me is to my reputation, be intact, and no sign of anything that had ever have it happen, if you will, in the court system, and for her to be accountable for the prescription issue, because I think that's huge. Because as I keep telling my legal team, that's where it started. The minute I found out about all these prescriptions is when she escalated her story. We even have a text thread about it. Yeah. So I think I even posted on the page. That's my defining moment. It was like that I can't let go of, and I said that again last week, can't let go of it. I mean, literally, there were people where they wanted, what do they call them? Counter complaints. So at one point it was said to me, well, if you drop this, she'll drop that. And I said, absolutely not. It doesn't, no.
Yeah, her counter doesn't change
No.
what you're bringing to the table.
Good Lord, no. No, oh, sorry. I heard making noise. No, so I refused. And I think they didn't know what to do with me, because I absolutely refused. I said, no, I don't care who she knows, who she thinks she has on her team. She's a physician. And I am in the substance abuse arena with my foundation. I've been I'm a mother of someone who struggles with substance abuse, and I've helped people for almost 3 years with it. So in my belief, as I said, it's what do they call it? A no game, or no deal. Can't do that. I can't let go of they used to call it the Walgreens issue. I can't let go of the Walgreens issue. It should have never happened. Obviously, this is somebody who's so desperate, who's a physician, as use someone else's name. That's a problem, folks. That's a big problem.
It's a matter of principles.
Yeah.
You're not gonna not stand your ground on something that's that important to you. I'm going out on a limb here. If you were to find out that someone was doing this and you guys didn't have a relationship that spanned anywhere near as long, still you would want something done about that, because it's dangerous.
Very dangerous, and it stayed on my record. It stays on my record, and that's why I had the fight with my insurance company, going, these need to leave. These are not mine. But but that's a whole other story. But that was the problem, is that what people don't realize, that even what's on your prescription history, you'd be surprised how many people see that. Almost every doctor you go to, if they're on an EHR system, they can pull up anything they want if they're on the right system. So I wasn't going to be asked for the rest of my life, well, why are you taking Fioricet? Well, I don't. So it was that too. But again, trying real hard not to make this just about me, but be
It's
helpful.
your story.
It is. It is my story. I don't want it to be my story. I didn't ask for it to be my story, but it is. And I'm gonna, one way or another, find good in this, and hopefully help somebody who may have been in this situation. Hopefully not as huge, but be strong enough to stand up against falsehoods and say no. That's not what happened. And be strong enough to
But that
not
takes
let.
self-confidence. A lot
Yeah,
of people's self-confidence might wither in a situation like this.
sure.
They might think, okay, you know what, this relationship has gone to ruins. I'm not even sure. Maybe I'm so overwhelmed at that point that I don't know how to utilize the resources, or I can't see what resources I have to utilize because I'm so wrapped up in the emotions of all of it.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's funny because there was a point where I was reading some of her falsehoods, and I started like responding to them, and I'm like, oh my God, how could somebody say that about me? And one of my girlfriends said, stop. This is not true. Stop believing her lies. But I actually, it was so weird how I was getting like reading it third party and almost believing what she was writing, even though it was about me. It was so surreal, and I started getting upset, going, how could somebody say that about me? That's not even true. And then one of my friends who was on solid ground saying, hello, none of this is true. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. It was so odd to me that I was getting sucked into her story, her fantasy, whatever you want to call it. It was very strange that I could allow myself to start believing what she was saying, so I could almost see that that people have to cling to their, I call, altered reality. And she had to just cling to that, because once you tell a lie, then you usually have to follow up with more lies and more lies and more lies.
You get even more entrenched in it.
Yeah, the rabbit hole is what we call it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the rabbit hole.
But you can reassert to yourself, sometimes you have to step outside, look at the bigger picture, and again, just really strictly reinforce that you know what is true and what isn't. Maybe there is a gray area. I don't know.
Sure.
I have no
Yeah.
idea. But if we're talking about, like, say couples counseling, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the Four Horsemen, this is from John Gottman, if we're talking about marriage counseling.
Okay.
We got criticism, we got contempt, we got defensiveness, and we got stonewalling. Criticism isn't just saying, like, I don't like when you do this, because this is saying, like, everything you do is wrong. It's a personal attack.
Okay.
Contempt is, well, just saying mean things, mocking, making the person feel beneath you.
Sure. Belittled. Yeah.
We get defensive. In this case, we throw out an accusation that we're unwilling to accept that comes back at us. And stonewalling, we just disengage. Sometimes we're so mentally overwhelmed we don't have an answer to give in the moment. But here, well, I wonder, what could be some things that might be overlooked? What are there any things that we can concede? Maybe there's not, but that could help clear the picture even for ourselves, so we can most appropriately move forward. Sometimes we could give a little bit of ground to take some ground back.
Yeah. No. I mean, I've come to terms with it, because what helped me is, for whatever reason, and I would say I have a guardian angel in my grandmother, Mary, and for whatever reason, I never deleted emails between her and I, and text. So I went back and started from, like, I had emails all the way back to like 2011, and I read going forward. And I read it not with love in my heart. I read it with cynicism, if that makes sense. So I needed to read it in a different attitude. And, came to realize in some things, I became aware of that. I kind of knew, the rose-colored glasses? Yeah. So, and I'm knowing her so well, I'm content in the fact that I have a really good life. And what I mean to say is, a very little I'm always like, there's always someone worse off than you. And because I don't measure my life in materialistic value, I measure it in happiness content, or happiness quota. And I'm pretty darn happy. I may not have been right away when this all happened. I was devastated for several months, but I sleep well at night. I do good. It makes me happy to help people. And I may not be helping this one particular person, and a lot of energy, people close to me have been very forthcoming in how much energy I was spending on this one relationship, and it was definitely not healthy. But I did it out of love, and that it happens, and someone took advantage of that, perhaps, and so I said, the last thing I said to her is, I can't wait to get my old life back. And what I meant was that I took on a lot of her stress, a lot of her issues, and they became my own. And so it was very releasing. So right now I have full control of my life, if you will, full control of my happiness, and a lot of things going on in my life that are positive, very little negative. So I'm okay.
Love to hear that.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I still need to explore this for a little bit. I talked about writing a book, but interestingly enough, I've written so many pages, and then it became what's the word? Something around my neck. What the term? Albatross. Anyways, it didn't. I couldn't do it.
Burdensome.
Yes, isn't that funny? I thought I was going to be so passionate. I was going to get my story out, and then I was telling my close friends, I can't write this book. I'm really struggling with it, and maybe it'll have to be an ebook. I mean, I look at like this. It's in a file. I look at it, I'm like, oh, I should add to that, but then I'm like, I don't want to touch that today. And then one of my friends said, that's okay. You don't have to. So that's when I changed the term of the Facebook page to Life and Stories, because once I move beyond this, and it'll eventually, unfortunately with COVID, a lot of things are on hold, but I thought, you know what, I'm going to move past this and use this moment in my life to help others who maybe aren't as fortunate and might be wrongly accused but don't have the resources to get them out of the situation like I was able to get myself out. Okay, another plane. Yeah, we'll fix this.
I'm thinking maybe that block when you try to sit down and write that book is a realization that energy could be used more productively elsewhere.
That's
you find more fulfillment in helping others than trying to, I don't know, exact revenge, if that's the word we're going to use.
Yeah, that's what my lawyer always says. You just want revenge, and I was uncomfortable with that word, and I even did a little blurb live video on that. I'm not a revengeful person, so that's tough because I'm not good in that space. I am not good, and I've said it many times on this Facebook page. I struggle with the idea of revenge. I struggle knowing that if I do the right thing, there's a big chance that her livelihood goes away, and I think about her daughters who I've loved since they were born. And so I'm constantly doing this because my compassion will always outweigh any kind of contempt, because that's unfortunately who I am. But she knows that, and I think that maybe there was some advantage taking of my good nature, but there's also that self-care, and I also recognize that I have to make sure that I'm okay, so there is a constant struggle.
So then maybe the word isn't revenge, more so retribution.
Yeah, I can probably, I call it accountability. So I like to believe I'm holding her accountable for the things that are out there, and I think that's in a sense good. When you're hiding income from the IRS, what about the rest of us that pay our taxes fairly? You have to be held accountable. When you're doing Medicare fraud, what about all the little old ladies that I had to be on the phone with crying because they couldn't pay their bills? That has to be held accountable. So things like that. Writing prescriptions for your daughter who now can't function in life, in a normal quote unquote way, you have to be held accountable for that. Doing your continuing education credits and having somebody else do them for you, but handing them to the medical board, you have to be held accountable for that. I mean, I can go on, and I don't want to waste that space. So I am comfortable with the word accountable. I would like to hold her accountable for things that she did, because this person tried to wreck my life, and I'm still, I'm obviously not still healed from this, and I don't think it's like any grief. It's to me, it's a grief process. I lost someone, maybe not in death, but I lost someone close to me in a different way. So, and that's just something that I feel in the same way, and that's not to discount, because I talk to my former mother-in-law all the time, who lost her husband of 65 years. So our griefs are different,
Everyone's grief is different, even if you're comparing a loss to a loss, like a death to a death. I mean.
Yes. Yeah.
it's a process like anything else. And in this case, it's kind of vicarious. We consider this a vicarious loss because we still don't know what that end result may look like. Still kind of up in the air depending on how this litigation goes.
Yeah.
Maybe she has a change of heart. Maybe you decide this accountability is most important and this is the one avenue I'm going to pursue out of that list.
Yeah.
I peeked, but there was a few, and then you said the top 3 are really the most important. Maybe you
Yeah.
narrow it down to 1 or 2.
Yeah.
These are all things that come with, well, what are our outside outlets as well? Where do we actually get the most fulfillment? We want that accountability, but we also want to be able to increase our happiness quotient.
Yeah. That's definitely, I live to be happy, and both my husband and I, that's how we live our lives. We live in such a way that, the typical stresses that downgrade our happiness are not present in our life, if I articulated that okay.
So what would you define as a typical stress?
Financial stress, work stress, relationship stress. I think all 3 of those could do a number on a person.
So if someone else has those stresses and they see somebody who doesn't typically take on as much stress from those realms, well, yeah, maybe there is an air of jealousy. Maybe there is an air of wanting to have them experience similar to what we're experiencing, because we've been friends for this long. This could be this scenario, this could be any scenario. And we want to feel like we are around and equal. Maybe we feel bad that we're being outshined. These are all things that could come into play. It doesn't mean that we have to give in to somebody trying to displace their stress onto us. That's why we maximize what makes us the happiest. So we don't have to constantly contend with outside stresses. So we don't have to get ourselves in that rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Which it seems like you've been pretty successful doing. You've been making sure to place an emphasis on that.
Right. Yeah, I don't like rabbit holes. I don't like holes in general. I trip over them.
Oh, no.
I stubbed my toe yesterday. They always say my middle name's Grace, and it's not. It's Marie.
That's because you're keeping your eyes forward, though.
I know, and I'm never, I'm never looking down, and that's why I'm always like my poor feet. But yeah, and of course I take, I'm such a, everyone who knows me, I am an advocate for mental health because we do so little, and we're horrible at it in this country. We're terrible. So I had to look at it from that kind of standpoint. I felt, and I've said many times, this is a mental health episode. I've said it to my lawyer, and he's like, well, and I said that this is a mental health episode. I've seen it, in when it happened, escalated, one that was escalated. It was her mother who got the brunt of it, and I guess it's just my turn not to be blasé about it, but it sometimes we compartmentalize things in a certain way so that we're okay with it, so for the last 2 years I've been compartmentalizing certain things so I could be okay with it. If not, like a friend of mine said, I would be, my head would be in the sand, I would be laying in a fetal position crying the rest of the time. But you can't, you can't do that. You have to get up and keep living and just make tomorrow better than today.
That's a distress tolerance skill in and of itself, right?
Wait, say that again.
It's a distress tolerance skill in and of itself. It's like not necessarily compartmentalizing, radical acceptance.
Okay.
We can accept the fact that this happened, right? We're not happy with it, but that's a balance that we need to strike.
And control, right? We can control it, right?
Completely out of our control.
Yeah.
That's kind of a central theme when it comes to, like, say, anxiety disorders, any sort of mood disorder, really.
Okay.
What are we most in control of? We look at fears. What do we have the ability to actually impact? What do we have to work on trying to build some strategies to better accept? Forgiveness might not be the term. Acceptance might be the term that we have to look at. Just acknowledging the wrongs. And trying not to personalize those wrongs either, because humans are good at doing that too.
Yes. Yeah, we take everything personal. Yes.
It's not a personal detriment that made this person do this to us. Maybe some behaviors could have contributed. Those are some things that people got to take into account. Maybe there were specific conversations that could have been steered a different way. Maybe I could have expressed my feelings about this slightly differently. But at the end of the day, Well, we can't go back and change the past. We could learn from it. We could troubleshoot from it. I would do that with a client, right? Bring in examples from the week of situations that you wish could have been handled differently. Not out of judgment, because judgment's only going to compound, say, guilt or shame.
No, yeah.
But with a curiosity, with an eagerness to try to do better. I'm a sports fan, so I use sports analogies.
That's okay.
Time,
No,
right?
that's okay.
But
No,
it's
that's
like,
right.
it all comes with practice, too. Some situations you're thrown into a game without the adequate practice. When situations like these arise and you realize you have that, come to light moment where, oh my God, these are in my name. Who could have prepared you for that? You got to give yourself some credit there too.
Yeah.
We don't want to set expectations too high for a scenario that we wouldn't have imagined would happen in our wildest dreams.
Right. I said that so many times. I said quite often, never in a million years would I think that something like this would happen. And because that's when the idea of the book came out, because everyone I was telling the story, because I was very open, because it impacted me so much. There are people that come to my support meetings know about it. There are, my board of directors obviously knew about it very soon. Even perfect stranger, I'll get in conversation. I'm like, well, this, happened to me, blah, blah, blah. If it's relevant to something that's going on with them. And I think that's the only reason why the book, The Best Revenge Book, came about, because it was just that pushback, but I'm not comfortable with that pushback. I just needed, the lies were so numerous, I just needed to be like, here's really what happened, type of thing. And that's done, and I'm happy, and there's a lot more to say, but I can bombard people with all sorts of evidence, but who really wants to, as my lawyer says, who really wants to read 1,013 pages of evidence? No one.
If we're looking at raw evidence that would be admissible in a trial, that could get a little dry. But you add your personality and flair to it in a book.
Yeah.
Make it more of a narrative.
Yeah, we'll see. Like I said, I keep saying,
I'm going to read it.
Everybody keeps saying that. But right now there's a block, and I think once I move past what happens with the prescription and insurance fraud issues, once that's done, then I can be like, okay, let's end this story. I think because we're not at an end is perhaps maybe why I can't. And who knows? I pick up something that'll make me think of it. Right now, her oldest daughter has been on my mind a lot, because I'm struggling with, I'm worried so much about my oldest child, my daughter, that, I'm thinking about Jordana so much and worried about her, and trying to figure a way of how to get her to realize what has been done to her. And I think that's really what's so pressing, because I'm a mother, and so there are some things that occupy my mind, I guess, so right now I don't have space to be whimsical.
Do you and Jordana speak?
Oh, no, and I completely understand that. This is her mother. I totally get it. Just like she doesn't speak to my daughter either. I totally get it. She has to believe in her mom. I get it. So that's the thing. I can put myself into people's shoes, and there's no ill will of any of her daughters, because I love them. And just because this thing happened, I still care about their well-being, which is why I escalated the proof about the, how do I put it, the managing prescriptions for our own children. Did not even know that wasn't allowed. Had no idea. I really didn't. They used to just switch prescription pads in the office. Never, had no idea it was not correct, not legal. No idea. How would I know? It's not something you would think about as an everyday person.
But that's, again, you're not reflecting on yourself with any sort of negativity. You're not saying, oh, I'm so stupid, I should have known that. I didn't know. How was I supposed to know?
Exactly. Just like her, we always tease about her bag of prescriptions she'd bring down to Florida for our girls' trips. We were like, Melissa has everything. Now we're like, oh my God.
It's like party?
Now we're like, what the hell is that? I'm sorry, I laughed because we were just talking about it. There's so many signs that now we're like, oh my God, and at first we're like, we're so stupid, but then I'm like, no, we're not. We didn't know. We didn't know that, there were certain ethical concerns when you are a medical provider. Just like a psychiatric provider, you are a provider of services that are very important, to people.
Code of ethics to stand by, do no harm.
Yeah. Yep.
If you're doing harm, it needs to be addressed.
Yeah. Yeah.
If your judgment is
Yeah.
clouded, that's why you have these outside bodies who come in to regulate and to
Regulate.
make sure
Yeah.
that things are copacetic if they're
Yeah.
not.
Yes, yes, and that's why I understand the false accusations in a way. I've seen desperate people try to hide their substance abuse. I've seen what they do, so I understood. I didn't accept it, but I understood it. If that makes sense,
Mhm.
you know, I knew exactly what was happening. The more I thought about it, the more I'm like, you know, it's they're acts of a desperate woman that I feel for in an outside way, a third party way. But as I tell my mother time and time again, I never want to speak to that woman again. It's a harsh statement. It's tough for some people that are close to me to hear that. Um, but it's it's neither forgivable nor forgettable. Um, and that's tough. I've never, you know, psychologically for me, that is tough.
As an empathetic person, sometimes we hope that the people around us are capable of extending the same empathy and understanding.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's another blow to just the paradigm that we've constructed that someone that we've been this close with isn't capable of extending the same courtesy, kindness, empathy, understanding that we are capable of extending to them.
And that's life. Coping skills,
Yeah.
right? I am very glad, and I will say, I tell people all the time, I don't, you know, I did 8 week training for something called Smart Recovery to be a facilitator, so that I could teach people how to hopefully manage their behavioral issues. So I did this in 2017, and this happened in 2018. And you know, obviously, it's based on psychological aspects of your brain, and you know, CBT and you know, RBT, all that. So ABCs, you know, the whole thing, blah blah blah. And I said to many people, if it wasn't for me, oh, I gotta do that, stop that. If it wasn't for me training myself to be a facilitator for Smart Recovery, I know I'd have a different response. I can tell you that right now. I wasn't as mentally healthy um, 3, 4, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, as I have been in the last couple of years. Even though I've been seeing a therapist for, I actually started seeing the one my daughter was seeing at 14, so, and then she retired. So 16 years, 17 years. I still wouldn't have been strong enough to handle what happened to me without this other extra component that I was so grateful to, because you break it down into manageable pieces. And that resonated with me with a history of being in operations and branch manager and construction supply, having direct reports, having to project manage things.
You rely on the evidence.
Yes.
Where humans like to run on assumptions.
Yes.
That's what we're great at. Well, we're supercomputers.
Yeah.
We try to calculate.
Yep.
And our calculations, rather than being based on objective fact, it's sometimes based on past experiences. And past experiences don't necessarily dictate what the outcome is going to be, but that's what we become reliant on. But then when you get the training to be able to look at, all right, well, ABCs, right? What is the antecedent? What is the behavior? And then what is the consequence?
Mm-hmm.
How do we recognize the antecedent or the trigger? What behavior are we trying to alter, and how can we modify the consequence to alter the behavior? It gives you a different perspective on how to handle difficulty.
No, yeah, and it's funny because in the beginning when we were bashing each other on on social media, but bashing is probably the wrong word. She was bashing me. I was just like, hey, here's really what happened, you know, and that was the thing. I was being triggered by that, you know, and you have to step away, you know, and occasionally when when she attacked my mom or attacked my friend, I would pop, and then I'm like, this is, and everybody around me was like, this is what she wants, stop giving her what she wants, you know. But it's funny because we have different triggers now because of this, you know, our propensity to be on social media, right? A lot of triggers there,
Almost inescapable.
yes. So you have to, you do have to remove yourself. And there were people saying, don't respond, and it, but because you want to defend yourself, what other way to respond? And that's when I decided to just, after having to fly all this evidence up to New Jersey, finally being able to, 8 months after the fact, say, this is really what happened. This is what was said. This is really what happened, and I'm like, okay, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with, and then did I care about what 20 people up in New Jersey who don't know me? Do I really care about these feelings? No. Why? Do they affect me in my life? They don't. So you have to project manage your feelings, right? And the triggers and the impulses and the reactions.
I say this to clients, like we don't want the outcome of our reaction to be worse than the thing that prompted our reaction in the first place.
Yes. Yeah, I like that. Yep.
But that happens a lot.
It does. Yep.
That happens
in theory.
a lot.
Just like people say, oh, history repeats itself. No, it doesn't. Not really. If history can repeat itself because we allow it to, but it doesn't have to.
Willful ignorance of history allows history to repeat itself.
Yep.
I can't blame somebody if they have blind spots, if they can't see certain behaviors and the impact of those behaviors. But if it's been brought to your attention that when you do this, it has this impact on me. If there is an unwillingness to change those responses, then conflict is going to be inevitable. Maybe that is the pattern of communication, the pattern of interpersonal relationships that you have grown accustomed to throughout your life, and you feel uncomfortable being comfortable. We can be comfortable being uncomfortable if that is our state of equilibrium.
Okay, yeah. Ooh, that's a tough life to live, though. For me, it would be.
A lot of people live it.
Yeah, that's too bad.
And there's an air of normalcy, so a lot of people can go about their daily lives, they have their families, it's all good. But within that, there is interpersonal conflict left and right, but that's how they know how to communicate. Maybe that's actually a fuel.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
It doesn't mean it's healthy or sustainable or healthy for the people around them.
Yeah.
But it is something. Like, we see it. It just comes down to, do you want to change this? Or is this something that you are resigned to accepting? And if you're resigned to accepting it, what about the people around you who can't? How do you address that then? But the rabbit hole continues.
Yeah, it gets deeper, right? Gets deeper. Sometimes. Gets deeper.
It doesn't have to, but it can.
No, but we had that saying that you're so far down the rabbit hole you can't get out, and there, I know people like that, and it's sad, because life is beautiful. I mean, I don't know, I look out here and I see nature, and life is beautiful. Not for a lot of people, and and I'm empath, and unfortunately I get heartbroken over the injustices of the world, and I know I can't fix the world, and I can't help everyone, but one at a time. When Sharon and I started K Foundation, and we were just like one goal of helping one family, so with this and life and stories, I want people to tell their stories that they might have been afraid to tell, or maybe thought they weren't important stories or what have you. So I want to hear people's stories, and because I think it's okay to communicate stories that serve a purpose, or are entertaining, or will teach us something, or will bring empathy to a situation, and so that's what eventually this page will be about, and this podcast will be about. It won't be my story anymore, because that has to just lay in the back burner, and
until there's a more concrete resolution.
Yes.
At least.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. It's not an ending that you could write at will.
No, it's not. And that's why I think that I have to see the ending before I can finish the book, if that makes sense.
But until then, you're giving people the opportunity to weigh in, share theirs, and I think every story is important, because it lets people know that they don't have to live in a state of isolation. There are people out there that experience things similarly. Yeah. Yep.
No, absolutely. I've found all sorts of stories, and like I said, it was heartbreaking, and I've always been interested in helping, like I said, an underdog, if you will, or people who just can't help themselves, or just need that hand up. And so we'll see where this goes. But thank you so much.
Thank you. Are you kidding me? It's so cool. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, we'll have to do some editing, I'm sure, and you'll have to come back when I'm much better at this.
Oh,
we have a lot of subjects we can talk about.
I'd be happy to. This is a lot of fun.
Yeah, and so we're going to figure out how to end this. I don't have any fancy music yet. So thank you all for, tuning in, and going to edit the podcast and make it all pretty. And for those of you on the Facebook Live, we appreciate you joining me. Okay? Have a great day, guys. Bye.